Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Talks with Tony. I have a bit of an explosive episode, I think, this time. I've been wanting to do this. I've been wanting to cover the subject matter. I've had a really hard time finding anybody willing to talk about it that knows anything about it. And lo and behold, a good friend of mine, Will, or Johan Fritz, as many people know him, but Will Nutter. Will, how you doing, buddy?
Good. How are you, Tony? Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for coming. You're a lifesaver on this. I think this information that we're going to talk about, specifically in IT and hacking, is super important. I think everybody is a victim of it, one way or another, and I think nobody is aware of it one way or another. And I think that 99, it's not 9 out of 10, it's 999 out of 1,000 have no idea how easy it is for things to happen, for you to get hacked, and for people to intercept data. I mean, you think that it has to be somebody that's gone to college or somebody that's had, but it's really not. People that are high school dropouts can hack your data and take everything on your phone. And so I want to get into that, but let me change my gallery a little bit. Thanks for coming on. So you're on here not only because you're my friend in another space, talking about other things, secret programs and things, but we're in IT for, you said, a long time. How long you did IT?
Yeah, I did IT and telecommunications approximately 30 years. So I've got an electrical engineering background and a computer science background. That was my first 2 degrees. And I've talked about that kind of ad nauseum, but I've worked with some big companies, and one of the companies I worked for called Endace, essentially what they did at that time was they started off selling a product that essentially is what's called full line rate packet capture, which means they can snoop up and scoop up all the data coming in on any, let's say you have a cable TV internet port, right, coming in on a coax connection, right?
Sure.
If you hooked in one of their boxes, you could literally scoop up every single piece of data from every device using that connection, then go back in and play it back and show people exactly what was gathered, how it was gathered, and who it was connected to, and who you were talking to, and all the connections made, so on and so forth.
So, okay, hold on. That's pretty technical. I want to say that 30 years is a long time to do anything. So yeah. You've probably watched it evolve quite a bit from where it started. And yeah. I don't know if you still do it now, but so you saw that. But I want to kind of unwind it a little bit, and because it's something that fell into my lap, unbeknownst to me, because I spoke publicly about in ufology. I became of interest to people. So it's like you get hit with all these weird emails like, oh, check, this could be you. And this click this link, and then you click it and nothing happens. And then the rest forever after your computer and your devices act strange until you factory reset them. So that always happened. You go, well, whatever. It's somebody I don't know watching me, and that's fine. So they're going to discover my porn addiction and my shopping habits. So that's great. Not a big deal. I got nothing to hide really beyond that. So you go, whatever, it's somebody I don't know. But what I found was that, but like I said, and I'm not an IT guy. I am not a tech guy anymore. When I was younger, I was into tech, all computers, but now not so much. But what I found was I'm also an empathic person. And I'm somebody that really tunes into body language. So are you. You're somebody that really notices body language a lot. And people in my life would change their body language. And I'm also somebody that coincidentally has a great long-term memory, like little details for long-term. My short-term memory sucks.
Yeah.
And what I realized was that there were people that completely changed their behavior 100%, that we were best friends. We got along great. And then they had me do something, click on something, or check, let me borrow your phone for a second. And their behavior completely changed and their body language changed. And interactions with them would change depending on conversations that happened on the phone elsewhere. So I would see conversations happen and go, wait a minute, I was just talking about grapefruits, I'm making an instance, but I'm just talking about grapefruits, and now you're sending me grapefruit memes. What? How's that? And then when you reset your phone, then I'd reset my phone, and then the behavior changed again, like on these things, and I go, whoa. How'd that happen? How did they do that? And then, so I, whatever, kind of filed it away in the back of my mind. No harm, no foul, no damage done. But then I worked for a company where it had an IT guy, not as experienced as you, I might add.
Yeah.
Do we have a guest?
Yeah, my stepdaughter's head now.
Oh, okay. But people not as good at someone not as good at they signed in the contract. There was an electronic thing, like when I hired on for the company. So I signed the right away. I had no idea. But he did it with a barcode scanner. So he came up to me one day right in front of me and set a barcode scanner down on my desk in my office, and he hit a button on it and he said, "Hey, do you got that email I sent you to your phone? Can you send me that email?" And I said, "Why? You need it?" "Well, okay, sure." And I got out my phone and I looked up the email he sent me and I forwarded it back to him. And he looked on not on his phone, he looked at the bar scanner and he got my IP. And then he said, "Yep, got it. Thanks." He didn't even look at his phone. He said, "Thanks," Tom, walked away. And the relationship changed the next day. Again, nobody didn't want to talk to me anymore. Because that's what I gather. So I haven't spied on anybody. I'm creeped out by that. Personally, I don't want to spy on anybody. I don't really want to know. I like the impression that I have of all my people, that they're all awesome, and I don't want to know what goes on privately between your conversations, if you hate me or not.
Yeah.
But his behavior changed and he quit. We talked every day for like an hour after work, and then that stopped. And then over time, everything, the relationship, all of it changed. And I realized that I was being profoundly hacked, not just a little bit, but at least like everything, like every communication ever. The space program talks, my show, my YouTube, all of that stuff. Are we getting remarks at around the water cooler at work, where I kept it isolated from people. And I went, whoa. And then I factory reset and I got scowls for a few days, and then it happened again. So then I learned that the IP, once the IP of your phone is gone, so once somebody gets your IP and your carrier and your phone number, those three things, it's only about $300 to buy the software and about $20 a month or something for the IP software. I shopped around, and that's all you need. And they treat it like, you say it's your phone. You call the company and say, "This is my phone. Will you put the software on it remotely?" And they go, "What's the IP?" Because it's your phone. And then you go, "Here's the IP, and it's on AT&T or whoever, and here's the number." And then it installs to your phone wherever it's at on your, and they do it at 5 a.m, so you can't hear it.
So that is what they call OTA, over the air activation. They actually use that. It's called a software push. And when they push that software to your phone, depending on the phone type, whether it's an Android or an iPhone, the phone verifies the package as it receives it. And then, like any other piece of software, it installs it. So you're none the wiser once that package gets installed on the device. And in some cases, it doesn't even leave a footprint on the actual home page when it actually installs. Right. Yeah. It's only installed as a package in the background. So you may not even see that package once it's actually done via OTA. So,
and to be clear, so as I looked into this, so I began to research because I was horrified, because I was completely horrified about it. I don't want my work people knowing what my personal life is like, not because I have anything to hide, but because it's just a violation. It's rapey. It felt like I got information raped. Like, that's the deal. And it really felt, it was a huge, clear violation. Like, and listen, I hate using the word language of rape, but that is unlawful carnal knowledge. And this is unlawful knowledge. I mean, of what is personal knowledge. It's kind of the same kind of level of, it's not brutal and violent, but I'm saying it's the same level of intrusion.
But you did feel violated. That's the thing that people don't understand, is that with this type of technology, it's insidious enough that when somebody doesn't have legal authorization, or even if they do have legal authorization, in some cases, it's still a violation of your First, Fourth, Fifth, and Eighth Amendment rights. In some cases, it's actually a violation of federal law. And in some cases, it can even be a violation of state and local municipality law, depending upon the software package and what they're doing with the data.
So I did contact the police and get a hold of them, and there was basically a goose egg out of them. "Sorry, you'll never prove it. Sorry, it's cost money to look into it. We're not going to do it." Basically piss off, was what I got. Now, it's important to say, at this point, I want to say this, because I know a lot of people are thinking, Okay, whatever, they just get my messages. That's not the case. They get 100%. They get if you're doing your bank app on your phone, they're getting pictures of your bank statements. They have access. They get key loggers. They see. So even if you can't see the password that's blocked out, they can see what you type in on the key logger. This is all your pictures, all your videos, all your Facebook, your WhatsApp, Snapchat, all of it, all of it. 100% of interaction with your phone is accessible at that point.
There are a couple ways to get around this, especially on the iPhone. So the iPhone specifically, I'm not saying the iPhone's better than Android. What I'm saying is because of the way the iPhone software is designed, they actually keep things sandboxed. Now that's an IT term, and what it means is that the memory from that piece of software can't be violated by the memory of another piece of software or an action outside that sandbox. So in other words, if someone's running security software, you're going to get probably with at least with iOS 15 and 16, you're going to get a notification saying, hey, someone's trying to do something on your phone. Do you allow this?
Interesting.
So for example, AirTags, for example, right? Everyone's talked about, air tagging people. Now what that means is AirTag is this little tiny Bluetooth battery powered GPS transponder that Apple put out, right? When they first came out, people were buying them and individuals were placing them in their significant others' vehicles and their bags and attached to office items or keychains. Now, some of that was for obviously good reasons, right? You want to know if say, for example, your kids are driving the car, you want to know where your kids are at, right?
Right, your own car.
But what people forget is there's already a feature built into the iPhones called Find My, which if that's turned on for your family, you can track any device into that plan. And that's the thing. When we get later on in this discussion, I want to get into that a little bit because that's what creeped me out because it happened with my ex-wife. So it's one of these things where, like you, I've worked in that industry, and because of my background, seeing how it can be used illegally and inappropriately, I eventually stepped away from it because I did not feel comfortable with some of the things that they were trying to do. And I also didn't feel comfortable with the way that data was being used against people because I felt it was inappropriate. It was getting wholly illegal. And I even brought this up to my management at that point. I'm like, you guys realize there is a legal boundary, a wall that we're going to hit here at some point. What is going to be the response in terms of how we deal with clients and customers when we hit that wall? And within about 3 months, they moved our entire support team out of state. Me and the one guy who couldn't move got terminated. And we were the two people they wanted out of there because we were the two that were complaining.
Right. You were the rock on the boat. That's
yes.
right.
Yes.
So the legalities of it, when you look at it, it's kind of like where we're at governmentally, and I don't want to turn this into politics, but basically it's not a crime if you don't get prosecuted for it. So it's not a crime until you get caught, and they're not willing to catch you. Like the idea is the system is in place. All the phones, have a camera on the front and on the back, and these 3 cameras, one of them is a wide angle so that when you lay it down, it could see you almost 90 degree. That's what those extra cameras are doing. It's because they want the data. The government wants to be able to watch us. So the design of the device it's meant to be spying on you. It's listening to me right now in case I say I want to buy. Here's what I love to do is say, I want to buy a bikini. I want to buy some bikinis. I for the whole family, I'm going to buy probably a couple dozen bikinis. And that way in my feed, I see all beautiful girls scrolling through on bikinis. It works. So there's that. So there's that aspect of it, which is, when we talk about United States Constitution, like other countries don't even have those abilities or a form of a shield against that for privacy.
EU actually does have a law now. Actually, the one law they do have that's sort of like what we look at in our 4th, 5th, and 8th Amendments and First Amendments. It's called GDPR. Now, some people may have heard this term in the news. It's actually how they do data protection over in the EU. So for example, let's say that you're on Facebook, for example, or Fakebook, whatever you want to call it. And let's say that you're on there and like you're talking, you've made certain statements, you're seeing things show up in your feed. That actually violates GDPR ruling because what's happened is their software has used your voice to access their ad feed. And without your authorization, it has went out and actually grabbed data to pull back to your feed. GDPR specifically and implicitly states that nothing happens on that device without your input and authorization. Now, the way Facebook recently has gotten around this is that when you reinstall Facebook over there, you actually have to say, I'm giving it authorization to modify my feed content. There's actually a thing that shows up and says, allow to track. And also, do you want to allow them to moderate your feed content? That's how they've gotten around that whole legal GDPR ruling.
If you read your agreements on Instagram, Facebook, or any of them now, it's absolutely breathtakingly horrifying.
Yes.
Instagram, for instance, I forget what I installed the other day, and I read it and I thought, man, they want access to all your data. They say it in the beginning of the reading, where most people read the first few paragraphs and they go, oh, whatever, just hurry up and give me my stuff. They want your data from your device, but then they want your router data and all the devices that connect to the router. So that means the kids, the wife, anybody, a mom that comes over, all of their data gets taken to forever after they touch your router through just one agreement. So, this is compiling. All the apps want to do this to you. So you have to clear your cache all the time. But this is on a corporate level. And I think a lot of people think about being spied upon on a corporate level. Like, what's the big deal? They don't care about little old me. And so really what I care about is on the personal level, or on a hobbyist level, like just in a community level. Like let's look at a community, and there's money to be made. There's gold in those hills for spying on people. So if you can take, and I'm not going to name names, like I'd love to, but I'm going to say this: if somebody has a piece of valuable information they share with a friend or with somebody that's researching, say, cars, and they have a new way of the motor being configured, and they send it, and then somebody else takes it, this new motor design, this new airflow design, which is no big deal. They intercepted that, and then they tell everybody that they invented it, and then now it's their property. That person that originally did it, they can make it to where they're not even allowed to use it anymore, even if they don't intend to have money with it. So this is what happens, I think, radically and often. The thing is, the point that I want to get across on this show, and why I want to talk about this subject, is because we think that it's only Facebook or Instagram or Microsoft that's taking our data, when really it's our neighbor. It's the kid across the street. It's your grocery clerk. It's the guy in the oil change clinic who takes your IP and gets your phone. Hey, that's a nice phone. What is your carrier? I don't get good service here. What is your carrier? Oh, well, I'm with AT&T. Oh, okay, that's good to know. And then will you put your phone number here so we can call you with so thanks. Okay, goodbye. And they got your IP because they scanned it unknowingly, and now they got your phone. Or if you're your Lyft or your Uber driver, like these are the people that have access. And when we're talking about personal things, like people date on their phone. So there's dating, there's like sexuality on the phone, there's nudity, there's a lot on and on and on. And when you're talking about the person across the street, now it's a really huge violation, because they know where you're at, when you're home, when you're not home. They know things. And so that's on the personal level. And that I kind of want to establish that. I think most people are unaware of it. And I'm going to have you back, man, for us to detail things you can do to protect yourself. The iPhone thing, like I'll be getting an iPhone next week, literally. The iPhone thing is a good tip. And I've had other people tell me the same thing, that iPhone has another layer, slightly better security than Android, even though it's basically not a wet paper bag, a wet plastic bag.
Another little tip I'll throw out, just since we're discussing it right now, the number one thing you can do on social media that will help a lot, it'll help remove, it's kind of like having a key on the front of your house, on your door, to get in your door. If you can use two-factor authentication on every platform you use for social media, turn it on, have them send you a SMS text message every time you log in to verify that you're you, or an email. I know that's kind of a pain, but here's what happens, right? You and I, we both went to Journey to Truth conference last May, okay? We were there, and one of the people that you and I spoke with there, literally it was 2 months after he got back, all of a sudden, everyone that's on his friends group started getting these weird messages about helping him reset his social media password. And what was happening is these hackers had gotten into his account and penetrated his account And what they were trying to do is they're trying to reset everybody on his friends list passwords, trying to take over these Facebook accounts. And the people who I know in that group of people who had TFA turned on or two-factor authentication turned on, they couldn't do it because, like in our account, we had TFA turned on. These guys kept trying to go in and activate a link to get us to do it. And I kept seeing the alert show up on my phone saying someone else is trying to activate a password reset. Is this you? And I kept saying no. And they went, oh, so all of a sudden this guy's like, I need, whoever it was like, I just need you to do this, do that. So what I did is I went through, asked Facebook, I said, where are these account password resets coming from? They tracked it down to the actual street in New York that the guy was living at, or the person was living at. They went right to the person's address.
No kidding.
And I said, can I turn this over to law enforcement? And they said, well, is this person, were they unlawfully trying to gain access to your account? And I said, yes. And they said, we will handle it.
That was it.
That was it. Facebook took it over from there.
Right. And they probably did nothing. I mean, I don't know. But any conference like this, so here we are. So this is a public level. This is an amateur, right?
Yeah.
This is somebody that's going through password. This is an amateur level hacking, which is, like I said, it's easy to do. You can spend $300 or $400. You can be in the game, and you can take people's info, and you can have a field day, and probably have a good time. And I'll bet at that point, I'd venture to say at that point you'd have the ability to steal a great deal of money. But this is the amateur level. So now there is a pro level of hacking above that. So you were, as an IT guy, you said that, I don't know, I got you on camera now, but you said that you worked with a red team, that you were working like a white hat version where you were infiltrating, testing out security of systems you set up. Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that how that is?
Companies would approach the team I worked for, and essentially they would say, okay, we know that our security is lax, both on the IT side and on the physical side. We're authorizing you to, first off, test our perimeter, test our IT perimeter, test our physical perimeter. But we also want you to sign an NDA so this information doesn't get released. So we go through this whole legal wrangling of getting all the documentation signed and authorized. And mind you, they approached us. We did not go out searching companies and doing this, mind you. But they would approach us, ask us to do the testing. We would give them a date range on when we were going to do the testing. Now, they wouldn't tell their employees when this is going to happen, mind you, but upper management knew. And what we would do is we would say, okay, well, this is the date range. We're going to execute this set of hacks, physical and IT. And just so you know, we're also going to show you when we're done how the hack was perpetrated, who was involved in the hack, meaning the person who was on the other end and us, and what they should have been looking for. And we're also going to show you how to fix it. Like when we're done, we're going to show you what the actual, the physical and IT fixes were when we're done. And it was eye-opening in some cases because some of this stuff was so simple. It was like walking in and putting a splitter on a line and hooking that splitter up to a device that actually rebroadcasted it out on Wi-Fi to our car out in the parking lot.
Wow.
It's like
physically doing it.
Yeah, it's like we had access at that point. We had access to all their data. So
everything. So that's on
everything.
The pro level, and at that level, so you're talking about all the data. But what if you were on a pro level and you wanted to take somebody's private home data? Like, how would you go about that? Like brute force attack, where you just try to log onto their Wi-Fi and put all the passwords you possibly can until you get through? That's a brute force, right?
So what you would do on the brute force side, the problem with brute forcing is you can't actually brute force routers anymore because of these software updates, at least the newer routers. What you would do is you would actually do what's called packet sniffing. You would actually gather enough packets that you can actually reverse what they call the WPA2 key is for most home Wi-Fi. And basically what you do is you have this piece of software go through, and essentially it needs a certain number of packets to gain what's called a level of assurity, meaning it has like a 90 to 95% reasonable assurance that key is the correct key. And then it hands you the key, and you actually try to attempt to log on to their network.
So you have to be nearby.
You'd have to be physically close. Like in those cases, if I was a hacker trying to get on someone's Wi-Fi, I might sit out in a parking lot, or I might sit like, let's say, for example, like where I'm living, there's a public area out here with benches, right? I might sit out in that public bench area with a laptop and just sit there for a while and act like I'm doing something on my laptop while it's sniffing all the data and accumulating all the packet data, and then go back in once I have the password and be like, okay, now that I'm on the network, now I would set up an actual piece of software called Wireshark, and I would actually sniff every piece of data just on that SSID. And
How long?
yeah,
How long does that take to like, if you were sitting there in the park with your laptop, like you got to be there an hour, or it just, or when somebody's active in the house?
yes, it depends on the level of activity going on in the house, because all of that is determined by the number of packets. So let's say, for example, you're actually at home. Let's say your kids are at home and your wife's there, and while you're watching your internet connected TV, all this data is flying around on your Wi-Fi network, right?
Right. Right. At
That
any
is,
given moment.
that is a prime target for someone to hack, because there's tons and tons of data for them to sniff, multiple devices using the same key, and multiple people using those devices. So you now have a plethora, we would call fish in a barrel, of targets to actually hit. Okay.
So, well, okay. So, but in terms of time, like in minutes at that, let's just say a normal
In
time.
in the example that I just gave you, you're looking at maybe an hour or two.
So a good amount of time.
Yes.
So a good amount of time.
Maybe an hour or two. Now, in terms of a slower network, it might take, let's say that in those cases, what I've seen people do, I've never done this myself, but I know a guy who still is in that realm doing this for companies. What he does is he would actually go in and get an Airbnb or get a rental vehicle that has an inverter in the car or the truck, and sit there for 8 to 10 hours and do what he has to do and then leave. In those cases, technically, he's not doing anything illegal because he hasn't entered the home. He technically hasn't stepped on their property. He technically has not violated the walls of the house.
And your Wi-Fi signal is actually in the public domain at that
Correct.
point.
That is correct.
So the hour thing is, so I want to get all this out of the way for the pro stuff, for the pro level. So we talked about amateur level hacking, and this is a pro level. So these are guys that have it's a lot of money. And what I found is that if you want to find the scanner, if you want to get the handheld scanner that sees if there's a signal or a bug in your truck or your car or your house, or you want to watch that stuff, it's expensive to buy the equipment to defend yourself. I mean, it's in the thousands of dollars. So you can easily drop $5,000-$10,000 defending yourself.
Sure.
But once you get the Wi-Fi, the router, then you're saying that you can get all the devices on it too. So with the router, then you could go back to your office or wherever and install things on a phone or the television set, or nowadays it's the refrigerator and washer and dryer. You can store your hacking software there, right?
So what I would do is, if I was doing that, I would first go in with one vehicle, do the scanning, do all the surreptitious listening, getting the Wi-Fi keys, gathering up the MAC addresses, because all that's intelligence. You're gathering up all the data from that network. You know that you want the data on that network, right? So you gather all that stuff up and you document it. You leave for a couple of days, get a new rental car. You now have all the keys. Now, by the way, you can do this, by the way, without paying any money out the door. The software that you can use to do all this stuff exists in the clear on the internet, downloadable for free. So amateur or pros can do this.
Okay.
And what happens is, I would come back in with a new vehicle, come back into that parking lot, and that's when I would start actually hacking the network, taking over phone devices, taking over the Internet of Things that are connected to your Wi-Fi, hooking up to your smart TV, intercepting data and gathering data and logging data that everyone's doing via the packet sniffer. Doing all that stuff would happen then.
The laptop, all the computers, you could get real time. You could be taking this video conversation real time.
Yep, that's correct.
It's very easy to do at that point.
Yep.
And I would say that you can turn the devices on and off.
Yes, you can
remotely. So you can turn the computer on and listen with it. Nobody would know. You could turn on the camera and nobody would know.
So Samsung actually just settled a lawsuit last year, I believe, because their smart TVs actually had a problem with the software that's embedded in them. it had a default password in it, and people were going in and actually hacking the cameras inside the smart TVs. The second thing that's happened a lot too, and everyone, this impacts everybody, by the way, is when your kid gets a laptop from a school, they actually have monitoring software built onto that laptop that can actually turn the camera on and see who's using the laptop. Now, legally, this gets into a gray area, because if that kid is dressed inappropriately, the person who turned the camera on is now involved in distribution of child pornography.
Right.
And law enforcement takes that extremely seriously if they know that's been going on. Secondly, and more importantly, there needs to be a legal reason why they're doing that. So when kids were at home and COVID was rampant and all that stuff was going on, a lot of kids were using these laptops at home to do their schools, right? They'd have a computer hooked up to the school network. They'd be doing all their classes and talking to teachers and all of that. Well, in those cases, they've already signed an authorization to allow the camera that's on your normal laptop or phone to be connected to that network, and it's going to be viewed. But this software was used strictly as a remote access tool, remote administrative tool. And that's the reason why they've caught all kinds of flack for it. And the thing is it's like, what is the need for that? Why have something where someone can go in and turn on your kid's camera, your kid's microphone, record what's going on that laptop? You don't. There's no need for it.
So the other thing that a lot of people are unaware of too is the level of facial recognition technology that is available, and the eye tracking. So your camera, so I'm on a laptop recording this. The camera is on. There is also, this is something I learned recently, that's actually cheap. Like if you're developing a piece of software, it's actually not that big of a deal. They are using facial recognition technology along in concert with eye tracking technology, so they can see where you're looking on the screen. And if you smile, when you go, ooh, and they know that you were repulsed by that, or if you look at something and you go, ooh, so then they can monitor their content, what was showing you, what was on it at that time, and they can change their ads, or they can change. So what I'm saying is, it also knows who you are and what you're thinking, what you're feeling. So they not only do they have a profile of you, they have an emotional profile of you. So people that can look at gore and they're not affected, like this opens the door. It's a Pandora's box of what can happen. And this is like cookie cutter technology. This is not high tech, not out of the realm. You don't have to be a billionaire super villain to have this.
Small businesses, and even all the way up to Facebooks and Googles, they're hiring people that are called experience engineers. And experience engineers, we live here in the Bay Area, so we live near Silicon Valley, and we know people who do this for a living. One of their jobs essentially is to figure out exactly what you're talking about. How do they change the experience of the user, literally manipulate their experience on that platform to engender them to want to be on longer, to be involved longer, to be interfacing longer? How do they do that? And that's exactly what these engineers are trying to do. They're trying to crack that nut to try to get more revenue on that platform. And the problem is that, go back to what I just said, the idea of manipulating people to get them to stay on the platform longer. That's really the problem, because
manipulating people.
Yes, manipulating people, correct. And you're not even aware you're being manipulated in most cases.
So certain people, so you don't teach an old dog new tricks. So the older generation that grew up, my generation, I didn't have, I had video games, but they were super lame. We didn't have this stuff when we were kids. The kids nowadays are sitting ducks. The people that grew up 100% immersed in this technology trust it verbatim as if it's the reality, and they're being manipulated. The other thing is it can be individual. So 1,000 people can watch a YouTube video and see 1,000 different commercials and 1,000 different recommendations on the next video to manipulate you into thinking to go, and they're way ahead of you on the subconscious level. Which brings me to the next category I want to talk about. So we covered amateur hacking, which it turns out is just as good as pro in some circumstances. Amateur hacking, then pro hacking is, guys that go to school like you and did IT and had honest intentions, and then it's just the industry has the ability to access data, which turns out is very valuable. But there's a government level. So as an IT guy, where did you guys run into did you ever run into, we can't do that without a warrant, we can't do that without permission?
So I worked for Sprint for a while before it became T-Mobile. And we actually had, I was a supervisor because I worked there as a tech, a supervisor, and engineer. And on the supervisory level, I was the guy who would get notified when law enforcement would do what's called a CALEA warrant, which basically means they would want to do a call intercept or a text message intercept.
The wiretap.
Yeah,
somebody's tapping the phone. We've only got 30 seconds.
The official wiretap, right?
Yeah.
And they would call in, they would say, hey, can you help us track down where this phone's located? And we're going to be doing the CALEA warrant end of it so we can listen to the conversation. We need your assistance on this. Law enforcement needs the assistance. And the first question I was legally required to ask, I would say, do you have a warrant to execute this authorization? Can you give me the warrant number? And I would have to log that down and log down the phone number being tracked and all that stuff. Because in terms of locally, I have to be able to tell my management, this is what happened legally speaking, in case something comes back to me, right?
Right.
Or if any of my techs were involved tracking it, I had to legally be able to say, tech so-and-so worked on this, and this is what was involved. Now, with the Patriot Act, all of that changed because they no longer were required by law to come to us to get the warrants or to execute the warrants. They had a centralized team in Kansas, Lenexa, Kansas, that would handle that. They weren't actually asking law enforcement if they had the warrants or not. So we never knew at that point once the Patriot Act came into play.
They didn't need it.
Correct. The secondary part of this is what you're talking about also too is what we call state level actors. Mm-hmm. Those individuals tend to have unlimited money. They tend to have unlimited development funds because they can develop all kinds of new stuff. An example of this was when WikiLeaks released this packet of data from the CIA about what they called their Whistler program. And a company just recently reverse engineered some of the stuff that came out of the WikiLeaks stuff. It's called XCDR33. They actually figured out how the CIA was taking over phones, laptops, Internet of Things, all of that. They actually reversed the whole package. And they said, this is how the CIA has been breaching people's devices. And the NSA has their own group too that does that. It's called the TAO group. Their whole job is to essentially figure out, how do I breach this piece of hardware so later I can exploit it? So the US has their own people that do this, but foreign governments have their teams that do this. Now, when you ask the question, have I ever run into state level actors doing this? The answer to that is yes. Again, when I worked for Endace, we had alphabetical soup agency people that we sold these devices to. They would bring them back in and say, hey, look, we have some weird data we captured on this interface. Can you show us what happened? And specifically, the one group that came in, I know we call them the Johns. They were from the NSA. We never knew what their names were. They always flipped their badges over. We knew they were from the NSA. And these guys would come in, they hand us their device. We'd put it on the rack, hook it up. I would fire up the server, and I'd use a piece of software that would actually play back the entire attack that showed them exactly how they got violated, basically. And I'd bring it up on the main display in where they were, because they're looking at through a glass window, they're looking at what I'm doing. And I'd bring it up, and I could remotely control that server now. So I'd walk in the room where they were, and I would say, okay, this is what's actually happened. And I would play back the entire attack. I would show, here's the IP address that penetrated your network, or the email that came in that penetrated your network, or the service that you attached to outside of your network that brought the payload in. Here's the payload that actually activated this on that local machine. And then here is what we call the spread ring, meaning how it went to every machine attached to that IT network, and now who are they talking to, and where's it going back to? You can show them the whole markup on what happened throughout their entire network. And I even gave them a list of IP addresses that were still affected on their network. I showed them the payload, gave them a copy of the payload, and I said, this came from China. I even tracked back where the payload probably came from in China. Showed them where this piece of data originated probably, and what it was designed to do. And the minute we showed them all this, these guys, I mean, their faces went white, and they were like, oh, you know, and I said, I'm recommending you immediately shut down any interfaces to this IP address, clean your network, and then reformat that box, completely reformat it and reset it up. And then when you do that, make sure you turn these things on and off to make sure it can't happen again.
Right. So what I've learned is that, well, I reset my phone, I factory reset my phone like monthly, and you end up losing a lot of data. It sucks. It really,
Sure.
you lose tons of pictures and all kinds of things you lose. It's very inconvenient, pain in the butt. But that is on a government level. That's like an international level. I think I would call that the next one up.
Yeah.
Where I was going was the police. So they have
Yes.
contractors, so they have the ability to execute a warrant, if they even need to anymore, they don't. And they have that ability to do that. So instead of them hiring people, these IT people are expensive. They contract it out to a subcontractor. So there's
Yeah.
companies that pop up all over the place. And once they get the contract, then they have the jurisdiction, they have the software and the ability to access people as if they have a warrant, even if they don't.
And it happens on two fronts, by the way. You've got people who do what I would call the what you're talking about, which is walking into homes, putting cameras, intercepting Wi-Fi, that end of it.
Mhm.
You've also got cops who have what they call stingray devices in their vehicles that basically looks like a mobile cell tower. And what they do
I've
is,
seen them. It's like a beefy antenna inside on the dashboard.
yeah, and that cell tower, the equivalent is called Stingray, or whatever the equivalent name is now. That device essentially, what it does is it creates the equivalent of a cell tower, and they can intercept every device ID trying to attach to that Stingray device. Because the way cell phones are programmed, it tries to look for the strongest signal in that area. So if that Stingray comes on, all of a sudden they're siphoning up all of these phones trying to attach to that particular device. And they do what's called a man in the middle attack. Essentially, the Stingray device is set up to bring the phones in and attach. They have a laptop that's gathering up all the data from who's talking to who, how they talking, text messages, internet. And they rebroadcast it back out to the network to another cell tower. So it looks like they're still on the network and everything's fine.
Right, but they're being intercepted at that
They're being completely intercepted, and these companies sell this hardware to law enforcement, local law enforcement, state law enforcement, and even FBI and other agencies too. But they do it because they feel that they need to have what's called immediate intercept, meaning if they have a target who they know in this area they have a warrant for, and in some cases it might be a FISA warrant, they'll send a group in to monitor that individual, to set the Stingray. They know what carrier he's already on, so they'll set the Stingray for that carrier, and they'll listen to everything that person's doing for a day or two. Once they get the data they need, then they go in and actually execute what's called the knock warrant. They come in, they actually hit the door. Law enforcement open up the door.
We know you're in there.
We have a warrant. We have a warrant for your
do.
arrest. We have a warrant for your arrest. Blah blah blah.
Well, you got to think, and they got GPS. They can see what room he's in.
Yeah, yeah, down to 3 meters, by the way.
Right.
So just kind of put that into frame.
Well, so this is something I wanted to bring up. If on that point, what I found out, which was shocking to me, was that so they hire contractors for this. So I think most people are a little creeped out by that ability by the police to intercept everybody's traffic in a neighborhood.
Mhm.
But on the same time, a lot of people are going, well, it's the police. I don't break the law. Don't break the law. But where I'm going with this is that it's not the police, that equipment is made for the police for it to be used in a legal way to fight crime and for the benefit of society. But what's happening is local smaller towns don't have the ability to train to have an IT officer. So they subcontract it to a private company. And that private company, because now they're signed and have a license, they go and get a license for it. Now they have that hardware. Not only that, but like you said, the laptop in the park, they have drones that will fly high over your house. So you can't even see the drone, and they will sniff and they can park the drone there for 5-6 hours and then put another one when it's done. And these guys are miles away in a van, and they can get your info. And this is a different story. I'll save it for another show. But they can park a drone and in real time, the drone can see with infrared or all the devices who's home and where you are in the house. These guys will walk in your house and put bugs and cameras in your house, or walk up to your router and do whatever they want to do and turn around and leave because they can see in real time where you're at. This is like stuff that we thought was only the special forces had. When really it's just some jackass who knew a friend that started a company and got a contract with the sheriff department. And so these people are very unscrupulous, and it's anybody. And once they get to that level, they don't care about solving crimes anymore. Now they're doing people that they know. They're doing, Mrs. Jones, that teacher that was mean to me, that guy that cut me off in traffic. I'm going to go ruin his life. I'm going to screw with him, and I'm going to put a drone over his house and get all his traffic. And oh, look, his daughter's this or that. I'm going to go do that. So these people are not good people, and it's got the Pandora's box is getting onto the wrong hands. So that's kind of my point here. It's way beyond the police catching a criminal.
There's also legal. So think about this, right? If you as a law enforcement officer are in the process of doing normally they don't talk about the cases when they're working a case. They will not ever discuss that with the public because they don't want to let people know who they're investigating or how they're investigating them, right? Methods and procedures, basically, right? They don't want to release that. But the thing is that a lot of times what you're talking about is you have subcontracted companies that basically sign an NDA and a waiver saying they will only normally use this technology in the lawful execution of a case required by whoever the local law enforcement officer group is. Meaning, let's say that it was like in this case it might be San Francisco Police Department or wherever it is that you live, right? Mm-hmm. That organization would authorize them license-wise to go execute and use this equipment and duly authorized cases, right? What you're talking about also, though, is the fact that these guys are sidestepping that authority because no one has any oversight to what they're doing.
Exactly. They're the ones that would catch them themselves. They're the only people that would do anything about it.
Yep. They're the ones that and thing is, I mean, a lot of these law enforcement officers are afraid of these companies too, because they understand they can flip the table on them too.
They can just intercept and go, well, you know what were you doing last Saturday? We happen to have pictures. Look at what you were doing with your phone. So what I'm saying, it doesn't take long to get dirt on anybody, and you manufacture dirt and put it on their phone. You can put false things on somebody's phone and it's all over with. So this is a very powerful subject matter that I feel that, like I said, involves everybody. Mm-hmm. And nobody's aware of it. Nobody's aware of it. And it's like, because I spoke out about in ufology, I became a public figure and became of interest. I'm somebody of interest. Like, is this guy making this up? Let's watch him. And so I had not only one, I mean, I swear when I reset my phone, I'll bet 7 or 8 people get deleted and they want to hurry up and reinstall. So, like I believe that there is crowds watching me because I sat in San Jose. I did a talk in San Jose and went into the plug and play conference center and set my phone down on the desk in front of me and was watching the speaker before me and watched it reboot on its own. And of course. And then I did it again, and then I go home and reset it, but it starts to do stupid things. And these are people kind of on more of the amateur level, amateur to pro level and down, like people that are trying to, because they say, oh, this guy talks about space aliens. Let's see if he's real or what his real intention is. That makes sense to me. That's the other thing. So let's look at it like this. Well, you're somebody that's had the ability and I haven't. So, and I purposely, like, even though I've discovered researching how to defend myself, how to do it, and I don't hack anybody. Like I said, I have no desire. I respect people's privacy. I expect my privacy to be respected, but you've been on the other side of the keyboard.
Yeah.
So if you were a criminal, like, and you're not a criminal, if you were a criminal and you wanted to make some money at this, who do we go after then? Whose phone do we take? Who's so, and not only that, but for entertainment value. So I would go after people that are wealthy or people that are celebrity, people that are doing, somebody that's in the A-list or somebody that's always doing something like you said in Grafton. Everybody there was a good hack because there was a lot of very interesting people there.
So to answer your question, in those cases, so if you're on the amateur side of this, most amateurs are just trying to be nosy, and in some cases, they're just trying to see if they can execute the hack, get the glory of executing the hack, right? And they just want to know, right, legally or illegally. The second group that I would say is in between amateur and commercial. Some of these guys actually get brought in and they get hired because they're good enough. They get hired to do certain execute hacks. Now, this gets back to what I've said earlier about following the money. You and I were chatting about this, right?
Right.
So we know people, you and I both know people who have hired these types of individuals and groups to go actually hack people in the disclosure community. We know this is going on.
Publicly admitted using contractors. Yes.
Yep. You've seen it. I've had it happen to me. You've had it happen to you. We know for a fact this goes on to most of the public speakers who've been up there, right? I even said this, like you're mentioning, when we were at Journey to Truth in May last year. I said that there's a probability that we're all targeted individuals sitting up on this stage, and don't be surprised if certain things happen, because we know that people are watching what we say and how we say it and who we say it to. And we know for a fact that if we say certain things, people want to know, well, where did that come from? Where's the source of that data? Where did that originate? Right. They want attribution. Everybody wants attribution. That is the gold mine you talked about earlier. What is the attribution on this? Is what we would call it in the IT world. Meaning the source. Like, where did it come from? Who originated that? And the minute you have that, you are a god on the IT world.
When you see where it's coming from.
Yep, you know exactly who said what to whom when, and who originated it and how it originated. You got complete playback of the conversation, so on and so forth. Getting directly to your point, I think on the amateur level, that mid-range amateur level to like the top end amateurs, those guys, I think a lot of times, I think there are some people who are very scared that what you and I talk about might affect their ego in terms of, well, we're not alone. There are things off this planet. There might be things going on that we don't understand. Well, how can that be? And they get right into this like fear-based mentality, and they use that fear as fuel, and then they want to know, so they come at people. The second group I would say is the lower end, what I would call commercial grade hackers, right? So for example, we've talked about some of these folks who get hired to actually start observing people. We want to know what, Tony is talking about. We want to know what, Johan's talking about or Will's talking about. We want to know these things. So we want you to go monitor their social media presence. We want you to monitor their phone presence. We want you to monitor what's going on in their home network. Can you do that? And what they do is they'll send a team out, what we call red team, to go in and actually do those activities. They would approach the carrier. They would approach the platform like Facebook or whoever. They would approach, the home address if they can find it, if they can legally find it on records anywhere. They will come at this individual and try to actually legally, be on the premise and try to listen to their data and try to hack their Wi-Fi and get into their network and all of that. So there is this whole cottage industry today around this idea that data equals money. And this is where people like you and I, who I'm like you, when I left that business, I've never illegally hacked someone's network or someone's device. I can say that unequivocally across the record. I stepped out of that realm when I left that business because the test I had for it and what I saw them doing to people. But what I would say is that when I got to where we are now, like when I came out with my disclosure stuff in 2018, I had it happen to me. I got what's called doxxed, right? It happened to me twice.
Right.
And essentially what happens in those cases is all they do is they try to gather up as much of your personal data as possible. They try to publicly post it somewhere. And in my case, what they didn't realize is I was actually in the group. I was actually a member of the group that was talking about doing the actual hack. So every time they would tag my name, here I am watching all these tags show up on their social media platform. And I'm like, what in the world is going on? I went back and clicked on that tag, and all of a sudden here's like a whole conversation about, well, we found his home address, we found his vehicle license number, his social security number, his license number, where this person works, all this data. And then literally within 4 hours, I'm seeing it put up on another website where they pasted all of this into the publicly accessible, usable format that anybody can see if you have just by clicking on the server's link. And there it is. And I'm like,
personal info. So you don't even really have to be that adept of a hacker to get quite a bit of info on somebody. You can spend $20 and get a lot of info. So that's all out there. Yeah, like I said, it's just you got to we're at the point where we're at the point in the conversation to where it's not if somebody's watching you, you have to
Two.
decide yourself who you're okay with watching you, right?
Yes.
So like I
That's
said, on a corporate level, I get it. You know, I paid you for, I bought this as your stuff. I'm using your internet, I'm using your network. I get it. You're watching your stuff, and for the because for advertising, because that's not the case. Let's call it what it is. Most of these guys are perverts. They're looking at girls. They're looking at girls for pictures. Ladies, be careful with your pictures. 90% of them are probably doing that. Some of them are wanting to get money. Other people, it's an addiction. It's a power trip, and it's addiction. I've worked in a couple companies and had people in my personal life, and they just get addicted to it. You feel powerful over somebody when you know more about them than they do, and they want to hit you with trip questions like, "So what are you doing Saturday?" Because they already know, and so there's that. So Will, I'm gonna pause this conversation. This is a great show. I think that where we're at for anybody that's watching this has a lot of personal reflection to do, because you're gonna look back in your life that things didn't make sense. People that were unaware are gonna look back in their life at things that didn't make sense and go, "Were they spying on me?
Oh,
Is that
crap.
why she broke up with me?" You know, like there's all these
Mhm.
things that are going to come to people that are unaware of this. And I think we've really, this is the shocking subject matter that they don't want you to talk about. Right. So that's why
They
I
do
just
not.
want
That's
people to
correct.
know, to understand. But here's what it is. I want to have you back probably in a month or so. If you would be willing to, I would love
Sure.
to have you back. And I want to talk about defending yourself against this, what the normal person would do to defend themselves, ways to clean this out, because it feels like once you get it, you've got, an uncurable disease. It feels, for me, I feel like once somebody's hacking me, it's uncurable. And so I just have to address them purposely. I have developed my own high-tech means of catching people, of just making sure that I'm, like, yeah, I guess there's no way that could have happened if they weren't watching me. So I've developed a lot of techniques on that regard, and I have habits that I've begun in my life. But I'd really love to talk to somebody like you on the technical end of it and see
Sure.
what's possible, what's feasible. And then I want to talk about other more high tech hacks that I've witnessed. So
Sure.
I will wrap up on that. Thanks you guys for tuning in to Talks with Tony. Come check me out. I'm going to put this show out free of charge. I'm going to air it for my Patreon people first. I'm going to give them a week or two of it so that they have access to it first. But I'm going to put this out because the subject matter is so valuable, and I think it's good for people to know this is a good. This can't be behind a paywall. So I'm going to put this show out for free. But come check me out on Talks with Tony on Patreon. That's like $5 a month, and I do these all the time. And I love you. I'll see you next time.
Mission Army, that's it. I'm gonna get